I'm happy to answer or dodge any question you want. Yes, sir.
I have one that probably is not going to wait until the next election.
Okay.
Our president is talking about bringing in thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of unvetted Muslims into this country.
Yeah.
What can we do to stop that today? Because we can't wait till we get elected.
Well, sir, thank you for that question. It is a very, very important question. President Obama has proposed bringing in tens of thousands of Syrian Muslim refugees. I think that is simply lunacy. If you look at the current refugee wave that has descended on Europe, one estimate is that of those refugees, 77% of them are young men. Now that is a very unusual demographic for a refugee. Yeah. Normally you're dealing with women and children and not 3/4 of them being young men. Right. The Director of National Intelligence has already said that among those refugees streaming into Europe, there are undoubtedly a significant number of ISIS terrorists. It makes no sense whatsoever for us to be bringing into this country terrorists who are coming here to wage jihad and murder innocent American citizens. Now you ask what we can do about it. Well, it's worth remembering, number one, this crisis is a crisis of President Obama's own creation. Yep. Yeah. These people are fleeing the chaos and oppression that has been created by America withdrawing from the world and allowing the rise of monsters like ISIS. Right. So what should we be doing? Well, in the long term, we should be defeating ISIS so they can go home and they don't have to fear the people who are chasing them out of their homes. But in the short term and the medium term, this is a humanitarian crisis. We should be looking to resettle these people in the Middle East, in majority Muslim countries. Yep. Now I will point out it is a different scenario with the Christians who are being persecuted in the Middle East. We are seeing right now ISIS waging a war of genocide against Christians. They are crucifying Christians. They are beheading them. The Obama administration right now, of the Syrians they're letting into this country, 3% are Christians. We need a president who will lead in providing a safe haven for Christians who are being persecuted for their faith, and at the same time defend us against allowing jihadists into this country. Right now, I'm working closely with Senator Jeff Sessions to try to shine a light on this threat, to focus on it. Now, unfortunately, existing law gives the president a great deal of flexibility on refugee policy. So our best effort to stop it is shine a light on keeping this country safe, but I make a promise to you that whatever happens, in 1 year and 4 months with a new president in the White House, if I am that president, the number one priority will be keeping this country safe. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, thank you so much for coming out. My name's Rachel. I was just curious, do you have any ideas on vice presidential candidates you might choose during the possibility of a Trump candidacy, or just kind of what do you think about that?
Well, terrific. Thank you, Rachel, for being here. You know, on the question of vice president, I do have some ideas on that, but I think it is probably a little bit premature. To use an example that folks can relate with, you know, announcing vice presidential choices now, it's a little bit like going on a first date with someone, sitting down and saying, okay, here's what I want the names of our kids to be. It's just kind of getting a little bit ahead of yourself. So at this point, my focus very simply is on competing, hopefully winning the Iowa caucuses, winning the nomination. But what I can tell you the characteristics of a vice president I would look for. The first thing I would look for is a strong conservative. Someone who will stand for principle. The second thing I would look for is someone ready to be president from day one. The most important job of the vice president is if the president gets hit by a truck, they need to be prepared to step in and be commander-in-chief from day one. And I will say we are blessed by having a terrific array of candidates running on the Republican side. You know, as you look at that debate stage, listen, any Republican would be a fool for that stage not to comprise a significant percentage of his or her cabinet. And so I think we have great talent to choose from, but I think it's a little early to toss out a name right now. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think the U.S. should do with China?
So the question is, what do I think the U.S. should do with China? You know, we're seeing China get more and more aggressive. And it's a result of the weakness of the president. If you look across the globe, every bad actor has gotten worse. Because weakness and appeasement does not work. So China, for example, is moving more and more into the South China Sea, is threatening its neighbors throughout Asia more and more. And it's for the same reason that Putin and Russia is doing that. It's for the same reason that ISIS and Iran and everyone else is getting more and more aggressive. Which is they've taken the measure of President Obama. And they've determined that there is no meaningful deterrent. That the commander-in-chief is a paper tiger, or actually more precisely, a paper kitty cat. How do you answer that? I believe in peace through strength. So how should we deal with China? Well, for example, it appears China was behind massive cyber warfare, hacking into our government systems, hacking into private systems. We need to respond firmly, for example, with this reciprocal response, taking down the internet firewall, taking down the Great Wall of China on the internet, and opening their people to the net. Opening them to freedom. We need to respond with meaningful consequences. You look at what's happening economically, where China often is eating our lunch. They're engaged in currency manipulation. They're blocking our own contributors. You know, you look at American companies that are trying to get into China, and China keeps putting barriers to block our companies from getting our goods and services, our crops, our products into China. We need a president who stands up and says, you open up your markets to our products, or you're going to find the same treatment on the back end. All right, last question.
My husband's a farmer, and I wonder what your opinion is about ethanol and trade with foreign countries.
Okay, so the question was, she said her husband's a farmer. She asked, what's my opinion on ethanol and also trade with foreign countries? Let me do them backwards. On trade, I'm a free trader. I believe in free trade. I think American farmers and ranchers and manufacturers, we do well when we open up foreign markets to our goods and services. We compete well and effectively. About 20% of the jobs in the state of Iowa depend upon trade with other countries. At the same time, though, I don't think we should put ourselves in a position where we're victims of currency manipulation or where we're giving up our sovereignty. So in this last vote in the Senate, I voted against giving President Obama that authority because I didn't trust his behavior and his conduct to defend this nation. We need a president we can trust that is putting U.S. interest first instead of international and global interests. Now on ethanol, let me answer the question by actually telling you a story, which is 6-7 months ago. I was here in Iowa at a large agriculture summit. About 1,000 people came out for that. And just about every Republican presidential candidate came. And every single one, without exception, who came there pledged their support for the ethanol mandate, including several who had previously campaigned against it. who somehow when they got on that stage did a triple backflip, turned around, and boom, they were in favor of it. And the only exception was me. And when I was asked that question, what I said is, listen, I support ethanol. I support biofuels. When it comes to energy, I believe in all of the above. I think God has blessed this country with abundant resources, and we ought to be producing all of them. And ethanol is a vigorous, competitive product for which there is real demand in the marketplace. However, I don't think Washington should be picking winners and losers. I don't think Washington should be deciding which energy product should be bought or sold. I think we should pull out all the subsidies, not just ethanol, but across the board, all of the subsidies, allow a level playing field, and allow the marketplace to decide. Now, it was interesting, when I said this, I didn't know what the reaction would be. I mean, this was literally the 1,000 largest ethanol producers in the state. I didn't know if they'd throw tomatoes at me. And I went on to say, I said, listen, I recognize that a lot of folks here would rather I said something different. That you would rather I said I'm for the ethanol mandate forever and ever, amen. But every one of us has seen politicians who tell one group one thing and tell another group another thing. And we know what happens. They go to Washington and they don't do what they said they would do. And what I told folks there at the summit is I said, listen, with me you can count on me for two things. Number one, I'm going to tell you the truth. And number two, I'm going to do what I said I would do. The entire group burst into applause, and when I left the stage, I got a standing ovation from the ethanol producers after telling them we should phase out the ethanol mandate. I think the crisis we're facing is real. And we need leaders who don't just say whatever they need to say on the campaign trail to get elected, but that have the courage of their convictions to follow through and actually turn this country around. All right, there's a young man who had a question. I said one more, but I'm not doing what I said. Do I have any siblings? Yes, so I have two half-sisters. One that was 9 years older than I am, one that is 8 years older than I am. My sister Roxana, who's 8 years older than I am, is a doctor. She's a physician. My sister Miriam, who was 9 years older than me, she unfortunately died a few years back. She was someone who had real challenges. She had real problems. She struggled with drug and alcohol addiction. And she lost her life to an accidental overdose. Which is, look, these are challenges millions of Americans face. And it is, it's a challenge that families have faced all over the country. All right, you too. What do I think about Social Security? I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think you're a little young for it. All right, that's a good question to wrap up on, because it's a good illustration of the kind of leadership we need. You know, for a long time, politicians have been afraid to talk about Social Security. They refer to it as the third rail of politics, which if you look at a train, the third rail is where the electric power goes through, where if you touch it, you'll get electrocuted. So you'd get politicians, they didn't want to touch Social Security, talk about it. But the problem is, the system we've got right now, it's headed toward bankruptcy. It's running out of money, and I think what politicians in Washington are doing is fundamentally irresponsible.
Yes.
That we need leadership to step up and save and strengthen and preserve Social Security and Medicare.
Yes.
And so I can tell you, when it comes to the third rail, not only am I touching it, but I'm grabbing it.
Right.
And I think we need Social Security reform with 4 principles. Number 1, for seniors, for those on Social Security or near retirement, there should be no changes whatsoever. We have made promises, People have ordered their financial affairs, counting on those promises. We need to follow through and honor those commitments. But for younger workers, you know, I'm 44. Not quite as young as you are, but I'm 44. It is hard to find someone, my generation, who thinks Social Security will be there for us. Now that presents a real opportunity. It presents an opportunity for reform. I think Social Security reform, for younger workers, we can do three things. Number one, gradually increase the retirement age. When FDR signed Social Security into law, the retirement age was 65. Average life expectancy was 62. People are living a lot longer now. Average life expectancy today is 78. So for younger workers, we need to gradually increase the retirement age where people have time to plan on it and know what to expect. Secondly, for younger workers, we should provide that the rate of increase of Social Security matches inflation rather than exceeding inflation. Those two changes together bring Social Security into solvency. But then I think the final piece that is critically important is to allow younger workers to keep a portion of their tax payments in a personal account that they own, that they control, and they can pass on to their kids and their grandchildren.
Amen.
And if we do that, by the time you get to be old enough to receive Social Security, it'll still be there, and you'll be able to have a personal account as well that you've amassed a substantial sum of money in that can provide for your retirement and that you can give to your kids and to their kids to help them start a business, buy a home, get an education, move towards the American dream. All right, let me say a final thing, wrap it up, which is I am so grateful for all of y'all for coming out today. If you share my conviction that the country's in crisis, that it's now or never, that we are at the edge of a cliff, and if we continue 4 or 8 more years down this road, we risk doing irreparable damage to the greatest country in the history of the world.
Yes.
Yep.
Then I ask each of you to join us. We are building a grassroots army. All across the state of Iowa, all across the country, I ask every one of you to come out in February and caucus for us. But even more than that, I ask you to step forward and volunteer. To volunteer to be a leader in your precinct, a leader in your county, a leader statewide. Help get your friends and family and neighbors and loved ones to come out and caucus in the cold of winter. To say, listen, this election matters. It matters for my kids. It matters for my grandkids. If we stand together, the only force strong enough to break the Washington cartel, to turn the country around, is we the people rising up, just like in 1980. I think 2016 will be an election like 1980 that we will win by following Reagan's admonitions to paint in bold colors, not pale pastels. We have done it before, and if we stand together as one, we can do it again. Thank you.